Joe Harris here. Today we're going to talk about sanding. Yeah, I know it kind of sounds boring, but there is a lot of aspects to sanding that different people just may not know about. It's things to do with the grit of the sandpaper and the different ways that you can sand. So we'll go ahead and get right on that and start showing you the difference in everything, and I'll show you a couple different machines and other ways that people sand. There's many types of sanders out there. Each of them has their own different purposes. There's different kinds of surface sanders, and what those are used for is to finish, of course, like it says, the surface of plywood or any other kind of wood or some type of surface like that. You've got a handheld belt sander, and then there are disc sanders. It's usually a mounted sander, and it uses a wheel type of disc device to be able to get different grits of sandpaper to finish the job. There's detail sanders. These are shaped in a kind of a football looking shape with a more open end. It's kind of hard to describe, but you can see the picture. It allows you to be able to reach different crevices that a normal sander can't get to. There's drywall sanders, and this is exactly what it sounds like. It's to smooth the surface of drywall. This allows you to be able to remove excess adhesive. There are file sanders, and they're also sometimes called finger sanders. This is like a handheld belt sander. For me, this is the main one that I like to use a lot. It gets the job done. There's orbital sanders. They're usually able to be used one-handed. They get their nickname of quarter sheet sander due to the fact that they use a fourth of a standard size sheet of sandpaper, and you can usually cut that by hand. There's the oscillating spindle sander. As the sander turns, the drum also rises and lowers. This allows whatever you're trying to sand to come into contact with the full surface. These sanders are usually used primarily to sand the edges of boards. I generally use it to be able to create rounded areas, like whenever I've had to cut out a curve or something, and these usually help you smooth out the surface a lot easier. There's also a random orbital sander, also known as a dual action sander. It has a rounded pad instead of a square pad. And then you have your sanding blocks. These allow you to be able to stretch sandpaper across the surface and use it to smooth down any of your projects. And then you have your table sanders. Due to the high speed, it's hard to really get precision work, but it does great to be able to take off a lot of material all at one time. There's also floor sanders, and there's a drum sander to be used for smoothing the surface of floors. This is usually used whenever they're building houses. And also going along with that, there's edge sanders. And this again is a high-powered industrial sander to be able to do housing and smoothing floors and things of that type. And of course you have your files. These can be used to be able to get into the tight spaces and be able to sand your projects without as much of a problem as having a large piece of sandpaper. And there are different types of grits and different types of files, and as you see from the image, you can see some of the different varieties. And then of course there's just straight out sandpaper. There are different types of sandpaper as well. There is micro grit, which is used to do real fine detail, and you can go from very fine to ultra fine. The grit of sandpaper is a rating of the size of abrasive materials on the sandpaper. The higher the grit number is equivalent to a finer abrasive. Lower grit numbers represent coarser abrasives that scrape off materials a lot quicker. There's also what they call wet sandpaper. You can actually use it wet or dry. Generally it's used with water or a water detergent mix. It helps reduce scratches by lubricating the surface. Water washes away loose abrasive grit, and the process prevents sandpaper from loading up with gunk and becoming kind of ineffective. Usually wet sandpaper is seen whenever you're doing automotive work. They'll sand surfaces between coats, and especially before doing a clear coat. The most common scene is, of course, just the regular sheets of sandpaper that you see, and that's probably what you're going to get the most use out of. If you watched a previous video, you've seen this belt sander in action before. I showed doing some of the Animal Warriors of the Kingdom stuff on it, and this is a example of a belt sander. They're different sizes. You can get one that's even larger than this. You can get them smaller, but This one is a perfect size. Came from Harbor Freight, and I think I paid like $36 for it. It's not really that expensive. And what it's good for is to be able to put your stuff down, and you can move it around like this is the way I generally try to do it. What that's for is it'll keep from having stuff build up on the surface and on the edges, and it just keeps the plastic from overheating and melting and causing you a problem. And what ends up happening, this one here has not been sanded yet, but this one has. You end up getting a smooth flat surface, and then you're able to work with it and put your paint on it, and then it's ready. Many times you end up with boxes or bucket full of different types of sandpaper that you've been using. That's the easiest way to keep them, because what ends up happening is, like, if a belt breaks on your belt sander or whatever, you don't throw it away, you keep it. You can continue to use it as just regular sandpaper at that point. And of course, whenever you tear off pieces from your sheets, then you're going to want to use that. So you just keep it around. An example of using the oscillating sander, you can come across your area, and as you see with the drum going up and down, you're getting full contact with all of the surface of the sanding. And so you're able to smooth, and it keeps a cleaner area for you to be able to come across. And you get your area pretty nice and ready to go to be able to build with. This is an example of the file sander, and as you see, it's got the belt on it, and that's why I just generally call it a handheld belt sander. And what my use of it is for is whenever I've got something like this and I'm needing to smooth a surface, I can take it and turn it on. And as you see, it's a lot quicker to smooth the surface than it would be if you did it by hand. Also, most of them has the ability to reposition where you want the spindle to be, and I generally have it like at an angle like this, just because I can hold it and put my pressure down as I need to, and it's at a good angle. But some people might actually just want it straight. Some people might want to go even at a tighter type of a bend, but just do it the way you prefer. That about does it for this video. I wanted to keep it short because I didn't want to bore you too much, because I mean, it's sandpaper, but still I thought that it was kind of a good thing to be able to go over all the different types of ideas, so that way you could be able to see. And it's a very important part of this hobby to be able to sand your objects, so I wanted to show you the different ways that you can do it. Hopefully that actually showed you something. So thanks for watching, trying to make it. Please like, share, and subscribe. And of course, ring that bell icon, because you'll be able to know when I'm uploading new videos. I'm trying to do it weekly, and I'll see you next week.